Hey guys, wanted to show everyone a very powerful feature in Excel. A lot of developers are not aware of. It's basically how to wrap a add-in so that it kind of monitors all workbooks at all the time. So no matter how many workbooks you open up, you will have access to control all of them. So I will launch Excel here, create a new workbook. And so typically what you want to do is, the first thing you want to do is save a blank workbook as an add-in. So we'll do that really quick here. We'll say save as, and I'm going to save it out to, let's save it to documents. Call this an Excel add-in, so XLAM, and I'll just call this wrapper, because what you're doing is you're basically creating a wrapper object on the application object for Excel, instantiating it when the add-in opens, and then you can create all types of events from there. Right, so we'll save that. We'll then go into our IDE. You can hit Alt F11, or if you have your developer menu visible, you can do Developer Visual Basic. All right, I see I have to open up that add-in explicitly, so we'll do that. We'll close everything, go to Documents. And I thought I just saved it here. Oh, there's wrapper. Oh, okay. It moved it natively to the add-ins folder. I thought I had explicitly told it to save to documents, but I guess not. All right, so we're going to go into our IDE. As people know that have watched my videos, I typically like to show the properties and change the properties of a lot of my native objects. So here we've got sheet 1, we'll just call it like sheet main. VBA project we'll call VB wrap or warp. And what's nice about changing this workbook object is then you then have access to not only the this workbook object that remains constant, but then whatever you call this. So I'll call this workbook wrap. Let's change this back to wrap instead of warp. And then just to give an example with this workbook object, you could say, workbook.name or this workbook.name, and get the same name of the workbook name. So one of the first things we want to do with this is we want to create a module and we'll name it, we'll call it mod wrap. We need a public global variable, so we'll just call it a public app, g_app, and we'll call this this will be an application object. This is native to the Excel object model. It's native to all Office applications, most useful in Excel, Word, PowerPoint, things like Outlook, where you would think it would be useful. It's not, because the mail items and calendar objects are kind of iterated underneath a mailbox, so kind of a different approach. You don't create typically a new instance of a mailbox. That doesn't happen that frequently. So you could use it in that regard, I guess, but I've never done that. But in Excel, this is very useful. So we're going to set an instance of this app to a global event, custom event that we're going to set in a class. So we'll create a class module. And just so everybody understands, this is not something I often remember off the top of my head. There's always like something I leave out. Thankfully, there's a lot of other, there's lots of documentation out there. There's not many videos, which is why I'm putting this video out there. This way, if you want to, you can just kind of follow along. So I'll call this class wrap. And we're going to create a private with events. So we're creating a wrapper into an object in this case, and it's not a custom object, it's a native object, so it would be related to the Excel object model. Private with events, and we have to give it a name, so we'll say app as application. And now you can see we have a hook into this variable here, this property, which expands the events of the application level object. And obviously you can do this with the workbook object, you can do it with sheet objects, you can wrap them as classes as opposed to going into them natively and choosing them like you would do here. It's more advantageous to do it this way, but you also have to take more things into account, like losing state and things of that nature. But this is definitely more powerful, especially in this regard. There is no native application wrapper, so there's no way to, it would be up here theoretically. I'm not sure why the geniuses over at Microsoft, and I'm not being sarcastic, by the way, I mean they really are geniuses, but I'm not sure why they didn't create a application level wrapper natively so that you don't have to hook into the application level object. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to tell it for this app we want to hook into the let's see, which event do we want to hook into? We want to hook into the, let's say we were going to do a sheet before right click event. So on any sheet in any workbook, we want to do a right click. So we're gonna hijack the right click event, and we're going to have something happen. All right, so that's a good one to hook into. All right, so now if you should click the right click, if you should right click in any context, any workbook, any sheet, this should kick off, and so this this will decide what happens. Now, before we can put code in for this, we have to create what's called a hook into our class. So this class will not instantiate unless it's a static class, like if you were in another language that like Java or something, you have to have a static class. In scripting languages like VBA, it's easy, and VB.NET, it's easy because you can just instantiate from a module level, which is just purely functional. So I'm going to use the inherent workbook open, so that every time this add-in is opened, it will instantiate our class. So what we'll do is we'll say we've already dimensioned this. So, and actually we don't want it as an application, we want it as a new class wrap. So that will create a new instance of our wrapper class. And then we're going to say, I think that would be enough. Let me see, set wrap gapp equal to, should be the same effect. Let me see, we'll step through the code just to test it out. Now we can see if the right click kicked off. We'll create a new workbook, right click. Oh, now we have to put code in, yeah. So, so for the right click, just say message box, right click worked. It's not working now. I have some sample code which I can bring up. Let's see. I just wrote this for a client, so it is somewhat fresh in my mind. All right, so there's our app event, there's our right-click event, there's what happens when we right-click the event, and let's see what I did wrong here. So right, new class app. Oh, right, okay, right, so I have to take the app events variable and set that. Right, okay. So what it's going to look like is this. When it instantiates, it's going to look like that, I believe. Let me just double check. App event. Right, so it's got to be the class instantiation, which is where I've gone wrong there. So it's that's not the class instantiation, that's the oh, that was the class instantiation. Let me see. Yeah, gapp. Yeah, that's right. Yep, gapp dot. So yep, that's class wrap. So g_app. Is it not? Why is it not seeing that? Class app. Oh, I guess it does have to be a public scoped variable. That makes sense. Otherwise, we can't see it. If it's privately scoped, you can't see it. So it'll be app events.app when we wrap it. There we go, and then it's visible. Okay, so now we create the hook to the application. And once that instantiates, it should capture the right-click event. So now we create the hook, and anytime we hit the right-click, we should get a click worked. There we go. And the example that I've given for my client, you'll also notice what I've done for them is I've added this feature parse founders, which is a nice little feature. I'll just go through that really quick. Let me disable the message box. That's where that doesn't pop up. So what my client had wanted was anytime they had clicked in a list of items with founder names, they could parse it out into separate sheets. So imagine you had like founders like Joe, Mary, John, Eddie, John, Joe, Terry. And then they had some data. And there could even be some data on the left too, so it's not discriminatory. Let's say more data. So if you were to right click under the founders and click parse founders, it would parse the data based on the name. And of course it's not working. I wonder why. So it is showing the right click. This is what happens when we add the this adds the right click data. This adds the parse founders in there, and then this is what executes. Looks like all the code was stripped. I think I maybe copied an earlier version. Let's see. Oh yeah, this might have been an earlier version that I copied. Okay, I didn't copy the one with all the code that copies out all of the data, so I won't show that. But as you can see, as far as the wrapper goes, and creating a wrapper to hook into any kind of event, doesn't have to be just a right what happens before you right click. It can be hook into anytime a window's activated, anytime you have a workbook deactivated, anytime there's a new workbook, so anytime the workbook is activated. So if we like, let's say we created a new workbook and we wanted it to let you know, hey, you created a new workbook, we could say, hey, you created a new workbook, or activated a new workbook. So that's different than new, but at any time you create a new one, you should get that message too. Of course, it didn't fire. Why did that not fire? App workbook activate. Sometimes what will happen is the app hook will get deactivated, and so let's see if that's what happened. So we can look at our local variable. And this is what I was talking about before with keeping state. So like this G app, let's see if it got set to nothing. Oh, it still has context, but it might have lost state. And one way to find out is to just step through the hook again. So we've recreated that hook. Now it should work again. There we go. So now when we go to a different workbook, yep, you created, this should say you activated a new workbook. So anyway, yeah, like as you can see, there's a whole host of application level hooks that you can tie into. So yeah, creating this this class wrapper on the application object is very powerful and very useful when dealing with add-ins.